Rude tourists insulted a Filipino waitress, unaware Millionaire was watching, and changed her life forever. The salty breeze drifted in through the open-air windows of the seaside restaurant, carrying the scent of grilled fish, garlic rice, and warm ocean air. The small family-run eatery sat just off the bay in a quiet Philippine town, where the waves whispered secrets and the tourists often forgot their manners. Lena moved quickly between the wooden tables, her ponytail swinging behind her and her notepad tucked in the pocket of her apron. At 23, she'd memorized every item on the menu and most of the regular customers' favorite dishes. She carried herself with the graceful urgency of someone who had no time to waste but still offered every guest a smile. Her hands shook slightly, though, as she approached the table by the window. 3 Western tourists sat there, 2 men and a woman in their late 30s, loud and dressed in beachwear despite the dimming evening sun. They had been rude since the moment they walked in, snapping their fingers, rolling their eyes, and complaining that the air was too humid and the Wi-Fi too slow. Lena still smiled. "Would you like to try our house special? It's grilled bangus with garlic rice and achara," she said, gently placing the steaming plates before them. The woman sneered. "What is that smell?" The taller man poked at the food with his fork like it had offended him. "This is the local special?" he scoffed. "It looks like something you'd feed a stray dog." Lena blinked, trying to keep her expression calm. "It's a traditional dish," she said softly, "very popular here." "Yeah, well, maybe you people need better taste," the shorter man muttered with a smirk. "Got anything that doesn't come from a back-alley kitchen?" The woman laughed loudly. "God, can she even understand us? Look at her, just nodding like some island robot." Lena's smile faded. She felt the burn behind her eyes, but forced herself to nod. "If you'd like something else I can recommend—" "We'll just order burgers next time," the tall man interrupted. "If you don't mess that up, too." From across the restaurant, a pair of eyes were watching. David Reyes Hale, 35, sat alone at a table near the corner. He wore a plain button-up shirt and khakis, nothing about him shouting wealth or status, but his eyes missed nothing. His mixed features, American and Filipino, blended in just enough, though he rarely stayed anywhere long enough for people to notice. He had returned to the Philippines a week earlier, ostensibly to scout for investment opportunities in ecotourism, but truthfully, he was here for something else. Something he couldn't name. A reconnection. A feeling he'd lost somewhere in boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. And now that feeling rushed back the moment the smell of grilled bangus hit his nose. It was his mother's dish. He hadn't tasted it in over 20 years, not since the small kitchen in Davao where she used to sing while cooking. The aroma tugged at something deep inside him, pulling out a memory so vivid it ached. Then he heard the tourists mocking it, mocking her, mocking the girl who served it, and suddenly that ache turned into anger. He stood slowly, napkin still in hand, and walked over to the table just as the shorter man made a joke about Lena's accent. "Excuse me," David said, his voice calm but cutting through the noise like a knife. The table of tourists turned, surprised. David nodded at Lena, then looked back at the group. "I couldn't help overhearing. You said this food looks like it belongs in a back alley?" The woman snorted. "We're just being honest. This place isn't exactly 5-star. David smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, you're right about one thing," he said. "It's not 5-star. It's better. It's made with heart and history." He paused. "And by someone who actually gives a damn whether you enjoy it or not." The tall man stood. "Who the hell do you think you are?" David pulled a card from his wallet and slid it across the table. "Someone who could probably buy this restaurant and turn it into a franchise. But I won't, because it's perfect the way it is." The man looked down. The logo said Hale Ventures, and under it CEO David R. Hale. Lena stared, stunned. The tourist suddenly looked a lot less smug. David turned to Lena, softening. "Could I get a second plate of the grilled bangus? It smells exactly like my childhood." She nodded, too shocked to speak at first. Then her voice returned, barely above a whisper. "Yes, sir, of course." He smiled again. This time it was real. "Thank you, miss?" "Lena," she replied. "Thank you, Lena," and as she hurried off to the kitchen, heart racing, she didn't realize just yet that moment had changed her life forever. Lena wiped her hands on her apron and took a deep breath, standing at the kitchen door as the scent of garlic rice and sizzling meat lingered in the air. The restaurant had quieted down after the earlier commotion, but her heart hadn't. She kept replaying the scene with the rude tourists and the man who had stood up for her, the one who looked at her not like a servant, but like a person. David Hale. She didn't know who he really was, not yet, but the way he spoke, the conviction in his voice, had stirred something in her. She returned to her duties, clearing tables, stacking plates, offering smiles to the remaining customers. She worked with practiced grace, each movement learned through years of repetition and necessity. Because for Lena, working wasn't just about surviving, it was about fighting. Born in a small rural village in southern Luzon, Lena was the eldest of 3 siblings. Her father had been a fisherman, her mother a seamstress. Life was never easy, but it was honest, until her father died in a storm when Lena was only 13. After that, everything changed. She left school 2 years later to help her mother support the family. While her classmates studied for entrance exams and talked about Manila universities, Lena washed dishes in a local carinderia and learned how to cook with leftover ingredients. She discovered she had a gift, not just for flavor, but for creating something meaningful out of nothing. Every night, after a long day of cleaning and serving, she would sneak into the kitchen and experiment with spices, textures, and plating. Imagining her name on a restaurant sign, her food in the mouths of people who truly appreciated it. But dreams didn't pay hospital bills. When her mother fell ill, Lena took a full-time job at the seaside restaurant, working double shifts to buy medicine, support her younger brother through school, and keep food on the table. Still, she kept her notebook. Worn and dog-eared, it sat hidden in her bag, a collection of recipes, sketches of dishes, ideas for a menu she might one day call her own. The restaurant's owner, an aging widow named Manang Pilar, liked Lena, but she paid minimum wage and couldn't offer much more. Lena knew that unless something changed, her dream would stay locked in those pages. And every day, customers like the ones earlier only reminded her how small the world thought she was. Too dark, too shy, too uneducated, just a waitress. But Lena never lashed out. She never cried where anyone could see. Her pride wasn't in her clothes or her status. It was in her work, in the way she greeted every guest with kindness, in the way she folded napkins into tiny fans, in the way her garlic rice never tasted exactly the same but always brought comfort. Some days she felt powerful. Other days she felt stuck, between survival and aspiration, between who she had to be and who she dreamed of becoming. Sometimes, at night, she'd stand at the back of the restaurant, looking out at the moonlit ocean, and whisper, "Someday." She didn't know when or how, but deep down, a part of her believed that one day someone would taste her food and see her. Really see her, not just a waitress, not just a girl from a village, but a woman with talent, heart, and something to offer the world. And maybe, just maybe, that someone had walked in tonight. The tension in the restaurant hung thick in the air, like humidity before a storm. Lena stood frozen, her hands clenched tightly around the tray as the tourist continued to sneer at the meal she had served, at her accent, her appearance, her culture. And then, suddenly, a voice cut through it all. "That's enough." Every head turned. David stood beside their table, calm but commanding. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. His tone alone silenced the laughter and condescension, like someone had flipped a switch. The tall man looked up at him, annoyed. "Who the hell are you?" David reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet, placing a crisp bill on the edge of their table. "Someone who respects good food and good people?" "We were just giving honest feedback," the woman said with a tight smile, her tone patronizing. "Didn't realize there was a speech included." David didn't blink. "There's a difference between feedback and insult. You crossed that line a long time ago. You Filipinos are so sensitive," one of them muttered under his breath. That's when David's jaw flexed. "I'm American," he said evenly. But my mother was born 10 minutes from here. She cooked this dish, grilled bangus, garlic rice, achara, every Sunday. It's the flavor of my childhood, and watching you tear it apart like it's beneath you doesn't say anything about the food, it says everything about you. The woman rolled her eyes and grabbed her purse. We'll eat somewhere else. Good, David replied. I'm sure there's a fast food joint where disrespect's still on the menu. They left in a flurry of eye rolls and muttered curses, the bell on the door jingling behind them. The restaurant fell into an awkward hush. Lena stood frozen, stunned. David turned to her and smiled, gently this time. Sorry for the scene, he said, but someone had to say something. She shook her head slowly. You didn't have to do that. I know, he said, but I wanted to. She stared at him, trying to understand the stranger. You said your mother was from here. He nodded, motioning for her to sit across from him at his table. My mom grew up in a barangay not far from here, he said. She moved to the U.S. in her 20s, married my dad, raised me on stories and flavors from this coast. Every time she cooked bangus, she'd tell me, this is what home tastes like. Lena smiled softly, her eyes shining with unspoken emotion. That's what I try to do too, cook with memory. You do more than that, he said. That dish brought my childhood back in one bite. She looked away, cheeks flushed. Thank you, I don't get many compliments like that. You deserve more of them, he said, especially after what I saw tonight. There was silence for a moment, warm, not awkward. Then he leaned back, looking thoughtful. You know, when I left the U.S. and came here, I wasn't sure what I was looking for. But sitting here, talking to you, tasting that food, it feels like I've found something I didn't even know I'd lost. Lena's heart thudded in her chest. She didn't know what this was, a kind stranger, a wealthy tourist, a coincidence? But in that moment she felt something rare, something she hadn't felt in years, seen, heard, respected. And deep inside, a small flicker of something she thought she'd buried long ago began to glow again. Hope. The days after the incident passed quietly, but Lena couldn't stop thinking about David. He returned to the restaurant twice that week, once for lunch, once for dinner. Each time, he sat at the same table by the window, ordered the same dish, and offered Lena a kind smile that both comforted and confused her. On the third evening, as the sun cast its golden light across the sea, David lingered after the other guests had gone. He waited until the last plate was cleared, then approached Lena as she wiped down a table near the entrance. Do you have a few minutes? He asked gently. She glanced around, hesitating. I'm almost done here. Take your time, he said. I'll wait. She nodded, unsure what he wanted, but feeling a strange mix of anticipation and nervousness. 10 minutes later, she joined him outside on the wooden bench facing the water. The tide rolled in slowly, the waves brushing the sand like a lullaby. The breeze cooled her flushed skin as she sat beside him. David rested his arms on his knees, watching the horizon. I've been thinking about something, he began, his voice calm but purposeful. Actually, I've been thinking about it for a while, but meeting you brought it into focus. Lena turned to him, curious. I came back to the Philippines not just to visit, he continued. I've been looking for the right person to partner with on a project, someone local, someone with heart, someone who understands food not just as business but as culture, he glanced at her. I want to open a restaurant, here, a space that celebrates Filipino flavors the way they deserve to be celebrated, and I want you to be a part of it. Lena's breath caught. Me? Yes, you, she shook her head slowly, eyes wide. I'm just a waitress. I didn't even finish school. I've never managed anything, never taken a formal culinary class. David raised a hand gently, stopping her. Lena, he said, I've eaten in Michelin-starred restaurants in 5 continents, but your bangus? It wasn't just delicious, it was soulful. You cook with memory, with purpose. That can't be taught. You have the one thing I can't buy or create on my own. She looked away, heart racing. But what if I fail? He smiled. Then we learn. Together? She was quiet for a long time. The ocean whispered. The last light of the sun turned the sky soft orange. "I've always dreamed of having my own place," she said at last. "But I never thought it could actually happen. It always felt too far." David turned fully toward her. "Then maybe it's time to bring it closer." She met his gaze. There was no pressure in his eyes, only belief, and for the first time in a long time, Lena felt something stronger than fear. She felt ready. "I'll do it," she whispered. David smiled, and Lena, still trembling inside, smiled back. Because maybe, just maybe, this was the start of everything. The opening weeks of the new restaurant were nothing short of overwhelming. Named Bahandi, a Visayan word for treasure, the seaside space David and Lena had built together was a tribute to Filipino culture and cuisine. The walls were adorned with handmade Capiz shell accents, the wooden tables carved by local artisans, and the scent of grilled fish, calamansi, and coconut cream wafted through the air like a promise. But behind the beauty, the pressure was real. Lena, once simply a waitress, was now managing staff, overseeing inventory, coordinating with suppliers, handling reservations, and ensuring the food left the kitchen with the same care and soul she had always poured into her personal dishes. Her hands ached from chopping, her feet throbbed after every shift, and her head spun with numbers, names, and deadlines. The first bad review hit her like a punch. A food blogger had shown up unannounced and criticized the wait times, calling the service chaotic and the kitchen understaffed. Lena stayed up that night rereading the post, feeling her chest tighten with self-doubt. Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I don't belong here. David found her the next morning in the back office, hunched over paperwork, eyes red from lack of sleep. "You haven't even had coffee," he said, placing a mug in front of her. "I don't have time," she replied, voice brittle. "The suppliers late again were out of tamarind, and that blogger said our chicken was overcooked." David sat beside her, calm. "Bad review doesn't erase the 24 glowing ones we got in the first week." "But it's me, David," she whispered. "This whole thing. Your name, your money. I'm the weak link here." He leaned forward. "You're the heart of this place, Lena." She looked at him then. Really looked, and for a moment, she saw not the businessman who'd changed her life, but the man who still showed up every day and rolled up sleeves, helping wash dishes when things got busy, learning to pronounce every dish in perfect Tagalog just to greet customers with respect. "You're not doing this alone," he added, and he meant it. Through the weeks that followed, David was her anchor. He stood by her through supplier issues, impatient tourists, and staff turnover. They held late-night meetings that turned into long conversation. They taste-tested dishes side by side, their laughter echoing through the kitchen when something turned out too salty or too sweet. It was during one of those quiet moments, after the last customer had left, and they sat under the soft yellow light of the closed dining area, that something shifted. They weren't talking business. They were talking childhood, loss, home. David shared memories of his mother, of his struggle to prove himself in a country that didn't always see his Filipino roots. Lena spoke about her father, about growing up with little but always finding joy in food and family. He reached for her hand then, hesitant, gentle, and for a heartbeat, Lena didn't pull away. But later that night, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above, doubts crept in. What if this isn't real? What if he just feels sorry for me? She remembered the way he'd looked at her that night in the old restaurant, the way he'd stood up for her. Was it admiration? Was it guilt? Or was it something more? And worse? What if she let herself believe it was love and ended up losing not just him, but everything they'd built together? The next morning, she kept her distance. She focused on the kitchen, avoided long conversations, and brushed off his questions with polite smiles. David noticed, of course he did. But he didn't push. Instead, he gave her space, let her lead, and quietly, without saying the words, he reminded her in every small gesture that he wasn't going anywhere. Still, Lena's heart was a battlefield. She wanted to believe in him. She wanted to believe in them. But she had spent so many years being told she wasn't enough, that love, like dreams, wasn't for people like her. So she held her feelings close, afraid to speak them, not realizing that the man who had once seen her through a storm of insults was still watching, waiting, and loving her, silently. The morning had started like any other. Sunlight filtering through the glass windows of Bahandi, the scent of brewed coffee mixing with the warmth of fresh pendesal. Lena arrived early as always, reviewing prep lists and checking on deliveries. But that morning something would change. While walking past the private meeting room near the back of the restaurant, she paused at the sound of David's voice. The door was slightly ajar. She didn't mean to eavesdrop. It was instinct, curiosity. But the words froze her in place. "I told you," David said firmly. "This concept works because of the narrative. Local flavor, local face. She's authentic. That's the draw." The man sitting across from him chuckled. "Smart. A fresh story always sells. Tourists eat that up. Humble beginnings, Filipina girl with a dream, gets discovered by a big-time investor." Lena's heart sank. "I'm not saying she's not talented," David continued. "She is, but let's not pretend this partnership isn't mutually beneficial." The rest of the words blurred as a rushing sound filled Lena's ears. She stepped back, pulse pounding. "I'm a story, a face, a tool." She didn't wait to hear more. By noon, she had already cleared out her locker in the back. Her apron, carefully folded, sat on top of the prep counter with a short handwritten note. "Thank you for the opportunity. I hope Bahandi continues to grow. But I can't stay. I'm not what you need me to be." Lena. She slipped out through the kitchen door before anyone could stop her. When David walked into the restaurant that afternoon, he immediately sensed something was off. The kitchen was tense. The staff avoided his eyes, and the air, normally filled with Lena's calm, capable energy, was heavy with absence. "Where's Lena?" he asked one of the sous chefs. The young man shifted uncomfortably. "She left, sir, this morning. Said it was personal." David's heart dropped. He hurried to the back, found the note, and read it once, twice. His jaw tightened as realization set in. She heard me, and she misunderstood everything. That evening, David stood on the same beach where he and Lena had first sat, waves lapping at his feet. In one hand was the note, in the other, the notebook she'd left behind by mistake. The one filled with recipes, food sketches, and dreams scribbled in the margins. He flipped through the pages, heartbreaking with every line. She had trusted him, and he'd made her feel like she was just a business decision. The next morning, David knocked on the door of a small boarding house just outside town. The landlady squinted at him through the screen. "She's upstairs," she said quietly. "But she's not seeing anyone. I just need 1 minute." The door opened minutes later. Lena stood in the hallway, barefoot, hair tied up messily, her expression guarded. "I'm sorry," David said immediately, "for what you heard, for how it sounded." "I heard enough," she replied, arms crossed. "You said I was the face, the story, that I was part of a narrative to sell a product." "I did," he admitted, "but not the way you think." He took a breath. "Yes, I talked about the narrative, about how tourists connect with authenticity. But I wasn't using you, Lena. I was trying to protect you." She blinked, confused. "I've had people try to twist our story. Investors, partners, they want to cheapen it, turn you into a symbol instead of seeing you as a person. I've spent weeks fighting that. Maybe I didn't say it the right way, but you're not a prop in my plan. You are the plan." She stayed silent. David stepped closer. "I didn't come to the Philippines to build a brand. I came because I was lost, because I forgot where I came from. You reminded me." He held out the notebook. This is your future, and I want to be in it, but only if you want me there." Her eyes welled with tears. "I just didn't want to be someone you chose because it looked good," she whispered. He reached out, gently taking her hand. "I chose you because no one else makes garlic rice that tastes like home, because no one else makes me believe in second chances, and because the moment you walked into my life, everything made sense again." Lena looked down at their hands, then back at his face, and slowly, hesitantly, she nodded. David smiled, a mix of relief and affection flooding his features. And with that, the first crack in her fear gave way to something stronger. Forgiveness. and the beginning of something real. David stood at the front of the modest boarding house, his car parked discreetly down the road, his phone switched off. He hadn't brought a driver, no assistant trailing behind him, no tailored suit, just jeans, a button-up shirt, and the weight of a truth that had been growing heavier each day Lena stayed away. He knocked once, then again. The landlady answered, blinking in surprise. "Sir, you're—" "I'm here to see Lena," he said gently, "if she's willing." She hesitated. She said she doesn't want to talk to anyone. David nodded. "Tell her, I'm not here as a CEO, I'm just David." Minutes passed, then footsteps, soft, hesitant. Lena appeared at the top of the stairs, dressed in a simple blouse and denim shorts, her hair pulled into a low bun. Her eyes met his, but her guard was still up. "Why are you here?" she asked, voice low. "Because I miss you," David replied. "Because the restaurant isn't the same without you. Because I can't stop thinking about what you said, and what I didn't." She crossed her arms, leaning slightly against the railing. "I told myself I wouldn't fall into anything that wasn't real," she said. "That I wouldn't be someone's inspiration piece, a success story with a side of rice and sentimentality." David's gaze softened. "I know," he said, "and I get it now. I should have said more. So I came to say it." She didn't stop him, but she didn't come closer either. "I never saw you as a marketing tool," he began. "Yes, I spoke about our story to investors, but not because I wanted to sell it, because I wanted to protect it." She said nothing, so he continued. "The night I first saw you, when those tourists insulted you, you didn't break, you didn't snap back, you just stood there with dignity, and it hit me. I'd spent years in boardrooms, winning arguments with money and leverage, but I'd forgotten what real strength looked like." He took a step closer. "You reminded me. You reminded me who I was and who I wanted to be." Lena's arms dropped slowly to her sides. "I didn't offer to help you because I felt sorry for you," he said. "I offered because I saw something rare, a person who could have turned bitter, but instead chose kindness. A woman who built her dream with no roadmap, no safety net. I saw myself in you." He paused. "Or maybe I saw someone stronger." Lena's lips trembled. "No one's ever said that to me," she whispered. "Not even my own family. I've always had to be strong because I didn't have a choice." "I know," David said, "but now you do." The silence between them stretched, heavy but no longer sharp. Then, slowly, she stepped down the stairs, one cautious step at a time, until she stood in front of him, and for the first time her eyes welled without shame. "You really meant it," she said. He nodded, every word. Lena exhaled shakily, her defenses falling one by one. She looked up at him, voice cracking as she said, "I didn't want to believe you. I didn't want to believe anyone could see me beyond what I used to be." David reached out, gently brushing a tear from her cheek. "I see you, Lena. I always have." And with that the dam finally broke, not in sorrow, but in relief, because for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. 1 year later, the restaurant stood like a promise fulfilled on the edge of the sea. Lena's Hope, the name carved into a simple wooden sign above the entrance, glowed under the warm orange hues of sunset. The building was modest, framed by bamboo and soft lantern light, but every corner was crafted with love. Woven mats hung beside handwritten menu boards, and the scent of adobo, lemongrass, and freshly grilled fish filled the air, wrapping guests in comfort even before they sat down. Inside, laughter bubbled at every table. Children played near the small garden at the back, and families leaned into shared meals. Tourists snapped photos of the food, wide-eyed and curious, but locals came for something more, for the feeling that this place understood them. At the center of it all was Lena, no longer just the girl in an apron at someone else's restaurant. Today she wore a crisp blouse and a name tag that read, Chef/Owner. Her voice was steady as she called orders, her eyes sharp as she watched over the kitchen pass, but her smile, that same quiet smile, had never left her. Her staff was a mix of young dreamers and old souls, many of them once like her, overlooked, underestimated. Lena had trained them not just in how to fold napkins or plait carré care, but in how to hold their heads high. They weren't just workers, they were part of her hope. And every Thursday evening, without fail, David Hale would arrive. He never announced himself, never made a show of his presence. He simply walked in, greeted the staff with a familiar nod, and took his usual seat at the table in the far left corner, the one near the open window where the ocean breeze drifted in. From there, he'd sit back and watch. He watched Lena delegate calmly during the dinner rush. He watched her kneel beside elderly customers, asking about their day. He watched her laugh with her team like a sister, a mentor, a friend. And sometimes, she'd catch him watching. Their eyes would meet, no words needed. After the rush, she'd bring him his tea, always lemongrass, no sugar, and slide into the seat across from him. They'd talk. Sometimes about business, sometimes about nothing at all. They made plans for a second location in a nearby town, discussed a possible community kitchen for struggling families. But other times they just sat in comfortable silence, sipping tea and listening to the waves. There was no title to what they had, no grand confessions or dramatic kisses under the moonlight. But when Lena laughed, David laughed too, and when she looked tired, he stayed until the last light in the kitchen went out. Love for them had not come in a rush. It had grown slowly, like rice in the fields, with patience, with care, and it had taken root. One evening, as the sea breeze rustled the wind chimes by the door, Lena and David sat on the front step of the restaurant, watching the final rays of the sun stretch across the waves. Lena leaned back on her palms, her apron smudged with turmeric and sauce, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the setting sun. David raised his glass of tea. "You've changed a lot of people," he said quietly. "In this town, in this kitchen, even in that boardroom I came from." He turned to her. "And especially me." Lena didn't reply right away. She looked out toward the horizon, where the sky met the sea, endless and quiet. Then, slowly, she smiled. "I thought I was chasing a dream," she said softly. "But maybe I was just walking toward who I've always been." David reached for her hand, warm and calloused from work, and laced his fingers with hers. And as the last light dipped below the waves, the breeze carried no promises, only the peace of knowing they had found something real, and they were only just beginning. Sometimes the most beautiful beginnings rise from the most ordinary moments. A plate of grilled fish, a quiet act of courage, a woman who never gave up on her dream, and a man who saw her for exactly who she was. Lena's Hope isn't just the name of a restaurant, it's a symbol of resilience, of kindness, of how love can grow quietly, like waves smoothing stone. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of the power of believing in someone, or made you smile through tears, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. Because here, every story is meant to heal, to inspire, and to remind you that sometimes the smallest people have the biggest strength. See you in the next story, and until then, keep your heart open and let your soul be stirred.